Back to our discussion on the Vladimir Kramnik Alexei Shirov candidates match in Cazorla, Spain. Um, after Shirov's win in Game 4, the next several games were drawn. 5, 6, 7, and 8 were drawn, and Vladimir Kramnik was faced um, with the prospect of having to uh, win this last game to enter into tie breaks. So Kramnik here had the white pieces, Shirov the black pieces. Game started off d4, knight f6, c4, g6, f3. And I'm not going to say much about this, but there's transpositional possibilities here. Of course, white declaring the intention to play f4 immediately. C takes d5, knight takes d5, e4. And now you get into grunfeld by transposition. Knight b6, knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e3, castle, queen d2, e5, d5, c6. So black gets to work on that center immediately. h4. And this reminds me of the variation of the Grunfeld correspondence legend Hans Berliner would play with this f3 not casting and then starting an early kingside attack. Usually, though, the rook would be on c1, the light square bishop on c4, and knight on e2. I'm not sure if this is like an inferior variation of that or not. Bishop e2, takes, he takes, knight a d7, knight 8 d7, sorry, d6, knight f6, bishop g5. So the issue here is white has pushed his d pawn up, and it's either going to be a bone in black's throat, or Kramnik is just going to lose the pawn. Um, this position is pretty interesting. I mean, black has decent development. It seems pretty easy to place his pieces. His big issue is dealing with the advanced d pawn. White um, king side pawns look very awkward. He has a lot of dark square weakness, and he needs some more development. Get his king tucked away and get his rooks into the game. Shirov plays rook e8, rook d1, bishop e6. Knight comes there, h3, knight c4, b takes c4, b3, bishop a6. Now it's hard for black to hard for white to get his rook in the game on h1 there, and there's really no king side attack. So his rook needs to at least get to the e file here. For black though, that pawn is very annoying. Now here Kramnik plays this move, knight d5, putting more pressure on the knight. But by moving this knight, it weakened white's control over e4. And now look at the e8 rook and look where the king is. So perhaps even better was pushing. This knight is pinned on f6. This forces the rook to come up, right? He either has to come to e7 or e6. Let's say he comes to e6 as to avoid the tempo from the knight coming to d5. Okay, that's probably a little better. And then move like knight e4 can be played here, right? Putting the pin on and blockading at the same time. So it's kind of hard to see what black is going to do about that pawn on d7 after knight e4. And knight d5 may even be a little stronger. So instead, a little bit of rush to judgment, knight d5, and now at the e4, excellent move, resource found by Shirov. Knight takes, bishop takes, d7, Kramnik's idea. Shirov finds a dynamic move, queen b6. I'm sure Kramnik overlooked this possibility. He probably was just simply looking at a move like rook e6, right? Normal. That's like what a dude will play on a Saturday at a Saturday chess tournament. Just like a regular kind of move that bishop takes e6, e3, maybe queen d5, then maybe catch the piece. And let's say at the knight g5, you have some kind of chances, right? Rook f5, maybe white's a little better. So, it's a weird position. That d7 pawn is a killer. But however, Shirov looked at the position, and again, one of the major factors is that the queen, not the queen, the black king, the white king is in the middle of the board, right? And his knight on h3 is out of play. The rook on h1 is out of play. So he just simply pitches it, plays queen b6, says go ahead, take him. So d takes, rook takes, so he's down a whole rook. Queen e3, so here's Shirov's plan is, hey, I'll just trade. Bishop takes g5, queen takes b6. Now bishop takes h4, king d2, a takes b6. So now Shirov down the exchange here, rook takes e4. But his bishop here is very powerful in an open position. And white's knight has no good squares to go to. Shirov continues the attack. Simply just rook takes e1, knight takes e1, bishop b4, rook e2. Shirov even just goes in the ending because he trusts his 3-1 pawn majority, which would now be 3-0. So let's go back and look what happened. So rook e2 takes, and now the pawn drops. So now you have the bishop and the 3 pawns. So this is a clear win. Let's make a couple of more moves here. And then here, Kramnik resigned and lost the match. So this was considered an upset at the time. So now, back to our report. Shirov has now earned the right to play Kasparov. Okay? So, this was a best of 10 games. And it's played on 2 consecutive days, so maybe that has something to do with it, some fatigue. But anyway, let history show that Shirov had won the right to play Kasparov for a prize fund of $1.9 million US. This match was going to start on October 16th, 1998 in Seville, Spain. Okay, so Kramnik received $100,000 US with another $100,000 US to be paid after the World Championship match. So now things started going downhill for this match, right? Because the WCC, remember that was this organization that Kasparov and this guy Rentero started, lost its sponsors. Okay, how did they lose the sponsors? Well, Rentero was a member of the political party which controlled the ministry, in Spain, and sometime after the WCC announcement, the control of the ministry passed to the opposition party. Okay, so in exchange for supporting vote on a key issue in the parliament. So this new leadership had no desire to sponsor the match, so to speak, or activities in general involving chess. Okay, now these guys knew about the situation earlier, but they didn't want to announce it publicly because they were figuring they could just find some new sponsors and basically never have to mention any negativity. So they kind of let these guys play on, knowing that everything was in trouble. All right. So now there was some rumors that Kasparov, Shirov were gonna play in Los Angeles or in somewhere in Spain, somewhere else in Spain. Okay. So now, billed as a warm up for the forthcoming title match, Kasparov played a friendly 6-game match. Maybe we'll look at this at some time. He played a friendly 6-game match against Jan Timman in Prague, Czech Republic. And this happened in 1998. And now, at the press conference on the eve of the match with Timman, Kasparov announced that his WCC title match with Shirov had been canceled due to lack of sponsorship and funding. Okay, so now what? Kasparov went on. Of course, he beat Timman in the match. But now, the new light on the horizon was that there was a new potential sponsor. This was Eurotel. This is the sponsor that sponsored the Timman Kasparov match. Okay. Now Eurotel Eurotel Praha was a Czech wireless company and owned 51% by a company called SPT Telecom. Okay, which was partially owned by Telsource. Now, the chief executive of Telsource was a man named Bessel Koch, right? K-O-K, I'm hoping I'm saying that right. A well-known businessman, and he always liked chess, all right? So, he sponsored a series of annual tournaments in Brussels, including GMA World Cup events. So, basically, later, he gone to a position with the GMA, but then he had a falling out with Kasparov. This put the GMA out of business. All right, so fast forward, they have these back and forth negotiations, who's going to finance, where these guys are going to play. All right, December, these guys were, it says FIDE secretary Emmanuel Omuku rejected Koch's offer to finance the match between Kasparov and a FIDE champion. Okay, so basically they said forget about Shirov, and now they're gonna have a $3 million match between Kasparov and the winner of the 1998 FIDE World Championship in Vegas. Remember, that was the knockout tournament. Okay, so the Shirov match is basically just forgot about at this point. And all this time, Shirov is not saying a word. All right. So moving on. Again, in December, the FIDE secretary rejected the offer to finance the match between Kasparov and the FIDE champion. All right. The FIDE championship in Las Vegas had been canceled, reportedly due to contract difficulties with Karpov. Okay, so now here's the shadiness with that, because again, Karpov had defeated Anand, I believe it was 97 for this. It was a knockout tournament. Anand made it. He played Karpov. Karpov won. So now they're having this falling out a year later. So basically, FIDE doesn't really have a champion. So then they got in the same argument again about who was going to be called the champion and who was going to be called the challenger. So Kasparov wants to be considered the champion. Karpov wants to be considered the champion. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So at this time, by the end of 1998, Kasparov again had no sponsors, no organization. Now, January 99, bear with me. The FIDE rating list had Kasparov as number 1 player, followed by Anand and Kramnik and Shirov. All right. Now, new year, Kasparov stops talking about a match with Shirov. So basically, they did Shirov dirty. Like, he played, won the match. See, he wasn't supposed to win the match. That's the thing. He wasn't supposed to win the match, but now he upset. Kramnik was like the heir apparent. Kramnik trained with Kasparov in the 80s, right? It was like an underling, and he was his second in the 90s. So Kramnik was always like kind of being groomed for this. He's high rated. He's supposed to beat Shirov. He loses to Shirov, and now it's all of this controversy. So now Kramnik stops. Kasparov stops talking about a match with Shirov and expresses his desire to play a match with Anand. So now he wants to play Anand. It reminds me of Alekhine and Bogolyubov. So now he wants to play Anand again. He already beat Anand in '95. Okay. Um, so again, going on. Um, then he says Anand needs to define if he wants to play a real title match with me or not. And now, finally, in February, Shirov comes out and says, since Gary has made many statements and given interviews, I strongly feel that the time has come for me to end my silence and express my views on what has happened with and around the WCC World Championship. Okay, Shirov goes on to say that back in 1993, the former world champion Mikhail Botvinnik said that Kasparov would end up as his own owner of the world champion's title, as it had been the case with Lasker, Capablanca, and Alekhine. Today, we see that the late patriarch was right. Kasparov has just stated that Anand is the world number 2 player and should just challenge him for the title without preliminary competition. Then he says, but has there really been no preliminary competition between 95 and 99? Then he says, I'm afraid this is where the main contradiction to Kasparov's statements lies. He says, when I won the match against Kramnik, I immediately realized that things were shaky and my match versus Kasparov was up in the air. However, officially, it was still announced for October 1998. They were speculating both Sevilla and Marbella as the location, and Rentero repeatedly said in telephone conversations that the prize fund of $2 million for the match was under control. The sad truth became apparent in the end of August when Rentero finally admitted that the signature of Junta and Lucia never existed, that he had all the copies of the contract and he could just eat them rather than pay me the $200,000 compensation for cancellation of the match as stated in the contract. The WCC did not stop functioning, however, and rather cynically offered me to play the match in California for the prize fund of $600,000, with $400,000 going to the winner and $200,000 to the loser, and Kasparov accepting that. Well, $200,000 guarantee for 2 matches, and then he goes on to say basically that he didn't get paid in Cazorla at all. Cazorla. So Shirov never got his money for that match. He was supposed to get $200,000 He never got paid. He says all I got in Cazorla were the bills. And he had turned down the offer to play in California because he felt it was too low. All right. So basically, he goes on. He talks about how he was, promises were made and nothing was confirmed. Now he goes on to say, because basically Kasparov, he comments on Kasparov's statements that he wants to play Anand. Then he says, I presume that my legitimacy, this is Shirov talking, as the world championship contender is not any lower than Kasparov's legitimacy as the world champion. And if we follow the historical line and assume that the world championship outside FIDE still exists, he says that my match against Kasparov should finally be organized. I have won all the matches I played since 1991 with a high score, and we're going to look at those down the road. So I feel ready to beat Kasparov in the match play. So Kasparov responds, I was ready to play Shirov, and I did everything possible to facilitate that. However, I did not succeed in either Andalusia or California, who both potentially provided us with the opportunity of holding this match. However, my adversary considered the conditions offered to be insufficient. Indeed, the prize fund in the case of California, just half that of Andalusia, but we ended up in a similar position. And then he basically goes on to say that not only Shirov suffered, but he suffered also, losing money, etc. And so he says, in order to compensate Shirov for his losses, this is hilarious. Uh, he says, this is Kasparov talking. In order to compensate Shirov for his losses, I have recently ceded to him the right to play a commercial match with Judith Polgar in the summer. And the match is organized by Besselkok, has a prize fund of $200,000 and will be held in Prague. Okay, so just to make an already long story short, Shirov was never given his opportunity to play for the world championship match. Okay, sponsors were searched for. It never took place, and in 1999, again, Anand was sought out. Kasparov really wanted to play Anand again, and again, Anand declined to play. So basically, actually, in 1999, press release was announcing Anand had agreed to play a match with Kasparov. At the same time, the candidates for year 2000 were announced with the next World Championship match in 2001. So after accepting the Kasparov match, Anand declined to sign his contract to play at the 1999 FIDE World Championship in Vegas. Why? Because this would have prevented him from playing any non-FIDE match like it did in 98. So now Shirov is upset because he feels like he's supposed to have the right to play for the World Championship match, but yet here's Anand playing in, basically, he feels like, he's being wronged here, as he should feel. All right. So now, Shirov responds again. Basically, Kasparov has stated that he wanted to play Anand because it was impossible to find money for the match, Shirov-Kasparov. So Kasparov is saying, hey, nobody wants to fund us. What are we going to do? And Kasparov also said the match Shirov-Kasparov was not interesting for sponsors because Anand was much stronger. So these statements offended Shirov greatly. Kasparov repeated these statements. And again, you got to understand that this top-level chess is a lot of psychological warfare. So even if they were to play at some time, these statements are buried in the back of their mind. All of these statements are little digs so that when they do play, these feelings come up and it affects play. For instance, you sit down at the board, you're playing with rage or anger or some type of feeling could affect your play. So these are all high-level tactics, being thrown about. So Shirov feels like he has to respond. He says that he says that Anand is not any more stronger than me. And then he says, nor is he, in comparison with, for example, Kramnik or Morozevich. Then he talks about how his last two performances, Anand's that is, in Monaco and Das Hermanos, were complete failures. And so basically he's saying, hey, I have just as right to have a title shot as Anand. And then he says a few words about Anand's legitimacy. Everybody knows that last year Anand refused to play the candidates match versus Kramnik. And now when I replaced him in the semifinal and qualified for the final, right, by beating Kramnik, he goes on to take my place, apparently without any conscience problems. So Shirov is tight, right? Shirov is hot about it, as if believing that it's not his problem that I don't have sponsors for the match, and the people who want to make Kasparov Anand match don't recognize my legitimacy. So he was really really tight about really hot about this. Okay, so basically Shirov says it was not a money problem that Kasparov preferred to play Anand instead of me. Then he says the real reasons one will never know. Um, so basically it seems like Shirov is trying to insinuate that somehow Kasparov was nervous about playing him in the match. Um, because he's saying it was a money problem. Kasparov said it was just basically um, sponsorship problems. So Cheryl says my last and real chance to play against Kasparov would have been Anand's negative response to the offer. Um, then he goes on to say, 1999, the FIDE championship was won by Alexander Halifman. Okay, so now he wanted Halifman to play. What's his name? Ilyumzhinov wanted Halifman to play Kasparov. Okay, so to add more insult to injury, a few weeks after this, Anand's manager announced that Kasparov Anand match is canceled due to lack of sponsors who pulled out in the last minute. Kasparov's manager responded that Anand's manager jumped to the conclusion and that now the match is really in danger. There were accusations back and forth who said what, but there really seemed to be no money for the match. Um, and in October '99, again, a press release was released that basically said that their match between Anand and Anand and Kasparov was canceled. All right. So now, again, it's back and forth with Anand. So the Anand Kasparov 2 match was really serious. Um, and negotiation was serious. Um, so basically, another sponsor came forward offering $2 million for a match in March 2000 between Anand and Kasparov. Um, they gave Anand up until April 21st of 2000 to sign a contract. Anand was suspicious because of past experiences and wanted some guarantees instead of just promises. For instance, Anand demanded an advance of $300,000. So, Raymond Keene, who was the spokesman for the organizing group, which was Mind Sports Organization, considered this unnecessary. So then, Mind Sports Organization suddenly disappeared. Sorry about that. That's super shady. Oh man, I can't stop laughing at this. And Brain Games Network appeared as the organizer, and the deadline was pushed forward to March 21st. Because of his and Shirov's past experiences in not receiving any firm guarantees except words, Anand decided to pass and eventually signed up for the 2000 FIDE World Championship, which then prevented him to play a non-FIDE match. Anyway, so this is the story, and thank you for bearing with me. I know it's a lot of stuff, but at least the history will be out there. So anytime somebody wants to know, hey, what happened to the Shirov Kasparov match? Right, Shirov beat Kramnik. He was supposed to be the challenger. Whatever happened to that? Now you know. So you watch these 2 videos. They'll be together on a playlist, and you know everything you need to know. All right, and then again, you see how close Anand was to. It could have been a non-Kasparov championship in 2000. So it didn't happen, and I don't know if Anand was nervous about playing Kasparov. Again, he played him in '95, but who knows? 5 years later, Anand's a little bit stronger. He's now 30 years old instead of 25. Who knows what would have happened? But I think Anand was right. I mean, there's a lot of shady organizations, just popping up out of the clear blue, people promising money and things like that. And then, you go through all this preparation and stuff. Next thing you know, you're not getting paid what you're supposed to get paid, or sponsors just dropping out. So I think Anand did the right thing. With the non dropping out, okay, the offer Kramnik, who ironically lost the 1998 Challenger match against Shirov. This even angered Shirov even more, because now Shirov is the guy that beat Kramnik, and Shirov as the winner didn't get anything. He didn't get the title match or the money. So he basically played a match, that he didn't get any money for, nor did he get the title shot. So it just cost him money to play. He played all the expenses, had to pay for seconds, etc. Didn't get any money. Kramnik is the loser. He got the money, right? Remember, he got paid. He got the $100,000, and then he got $100,000 promised later, and the title match. Okay, and so now you know the history. Kramnik, of course, accepted, and this was announced for October 9th, 2000, and Kramnik would go on to become the world champion. Um, Now, when being asked about Shirov, Kasparov said in 1998, Shirov had the right to play me. Then he said in 2000, it's a different situation with the new organization and control, and he kind of left it at that. Then Shirov responded in an open letter with, I do believe that the Kasparov-Kramnik match cannot have anything to do with any kind of world championship, be it official, historical, brain, or whatever. I am the legitimate candidate for it since 1998. So Shirov maintained his position in the following years, because he refused to accept Kramnik as a world champion. Um, and of course, 5 years after Kasparov's last title defense, the match finally happened. And at that time, it was billed as the Brain Games World Championship, but later it was retroactively renamed to the Classical World Championship. So very interesting history, because a lot of people, right, usually have people on two sides of this thing, where they believe that the chess tradition is very important, and that the chess title should always be decided via match play. So you have Fischer beat Spassky, and then of course Fischer just abducted the title. But then you had Kasparov beat Karpov, Kramnik beat Kasparov, etc. Spassky beats Petrosian, and so on. There's this lineage. Now the facts have been presented, and the lineage has been broken, because Kramnik was. It's funny, because Kramnik was never supposed to play for the title, because he lost the previous match to Shirov. Okay, so imagine if, say, you go back to the early days of the candidates match, right, and say Tao lost to Spassky in the candidates match, but then somehow Tao was still allowed to play for the title and then beat the champion. Okay, so this was Shirov's argument. He was like, hey, I'm the rightful challenger, and he never got his chance. Now, let's bring up something that I did not mention for the whole entire time. And this is probably what I think the real reason is. Because of course the truth, I don't think in any way that Kasparov was afraid of playing Shirov. So let's get that out of the way. I think the lack of interest in the match was due to Shirov's absolute abysmal record against Garry Kasparov. They played many times. I want to say, and I'm kind of they played, I think, 30 times or 31 times. Kasparov has like 15 wins, right? And like 0 losses, and I want to say 16 draws. So that's 31 times. You can look that up. Either 14 or 15 wins, but no losses against Shirov in about 30 or 31 games. Okay, look, you can look that up to confirm that. And so with a record like that, sponsors looking at that, and there's no intrigue about the match. There's no excitement. You're not saying, oh, Shirov might pull this off, right? He's just, you're looking, so that Shirov never mentioned that in his rebuttals. So um was Shirov definitely giving the short end of the stick? Absolutely. Was Shirov giving the shaft? Absolutely. I mean, he at least should have gotten paid, right, for at least winning the match against Kramnik. He didn't even get paid. So I mean, that was the worst. And then you see after that, Shirov basically kind of never the same after that. I mean, he's still a strong grandmaster today. You know what I mean? But just think of what that whole ordeal probably did to him psychologically. Okay. Um, I mean, that was just brutal. But it's funny because then at the same time, it's hard to really say, oh, he would have had chances against Kasparov. Now you can all say, oh, you never know, if they played in a match as opposed to individual games, preparation, this and that. But man, that was just you talk about the stars aligning and the right circumstances coming together, all this stuff with the sponsors and Anand turning down the match, and then finally Kramnik getting back an opportunity to play, because if Anand accepts, it's Anand Kasparov. And Kramnik doesn't even get a shot. But Anand turns it down. Anand says no. These organizations are too shady. I want 300 G's up front in the bank account, and they're like nope. And then Kramnik said, "Oh, I'll take it." And Shirov is looking like, "What the heck? I beat this dude a couple of years ago, and now he's getting the money. He's getting the money and the title shot." Then to add insult to injury, Kramnik goes on and wins the title and defends the title, and then you never even hear Shirov. Shirov goes like kind of like in the back pages of chess history, so to speak. So, in a way, these two videos are kind of like a shout out to Shirov, man, Alexei Shirov, because what he went through was insane. And it's just like whoa, this reading this stuff, and I felt impelled um I'm sorry, impelled, compelled to share it with the chess world. I know this video is crazy long, so I'm gonna I'm gonna cut it short. But I just wanted to to get it out there. There's like many sources on the internet, um, with the stories with the story. But I just wanted to put it all together. And believe me, I condensed this. There's a lot of pages, and and show you the games also to show that Shirov was you know, um, in his form at that time. So with that, I'll end this video. Please like, subscribe, and